I'm a project manager for an RDPO, that's a Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization, Portland metro area project, which is on about building damage assessment. So one of our goals in this project was to find a tool that could give us building specific information as soon as possible after an earthquake. So John has been on a hunt for that, and we've had a couple iterations or things that we thought we'd pursue, and John has been watching the development of this 2-pager product for quite a while, and really felt as we were searching that it was ready for prime time. And so we're proposing this to municipal. It's a free product, John will tell you, but we're proposing this to the municipalities to sign on to, and then we'll do some training around how you would use it. And John, many of you know, was at Dogami, our state agency for geology and minerals. He's a natural resources specialist. Started out as an engineer and came over to natural resources with his master's degree. And really, John, you worked in Dogami for, I don't know, seemed like a long time. All the time you were there all the time I knew about it. But anyway, so John, I have asked him to consult with this project to help us solve this problem. And he's going to present what he's come up with today. So over to you, John.
Sure. Thanks, Ann. And I'll start sharing my screen. Oops, wrong one. So I'm going to stop share, and too many screens. There, you should be seeing a blank screen.
Yep.
Okay, and now you should be seeing.
Yep.
Right. Okay. So what just happened? We're talking about earthquakes, and what you're seeing here on the right is well, it's showing census tracts, and census tracts are subdivisions of a county, and these are the 5 counties that are in the greater Portland, Oregon area here. And the color ramp is showing a measure of the impact or damage from a modeled Cascadia subduction zone, or CSE, earthquake. And the deep blues are more impact, yellows are less. So the point here is that the expected impacts will vary widely across the 5-county area. Some areas impacted much more than others. And I hope to show you how this 2-pager product can answer that question, the where and how much data, and how that could be useful in your post-earthquake response and recovery. So if you are not in the greater Portland area, well, just imagine this being available for the entire state of Oregon, for that matter, from California to Washington. So if you have questions, please speak up or enter them in the chat, and Ann can moderate. I'm happy to take questions. So the 2-pager, yes, introduce it and also show how to access and use its spatial data for post-earthquake response, recovery, situational awareness. The webinar agenda here, background on this, and yes, we do need to do some terminology, and a recent example of how this, how a 2-pager email broadcast was sent out on a real live earthquake, and then a quick and not so deep dive into the GIS data behind all this and future plans and recommendations. This is the program. This is the 2-pager objective. After any major earthquake in the United States, provide timely estimates in terms of injuries and fatalities, mass care, building damage, debris management, and then damage to critical infrastructure. And that data are available at a region and state, and that's more in PDF form, and it's also at county level and PDF and tabular form. What I'm going to be talking about here is at the census tract level, which I think will be the most useful for your purposes. And you might ask, what is a census tract? We will come back to that, but briefly, a census tract is a subdivision of a county. So some assumptions. You have good knowledge of your communities, what information you need for situational awareness, post-earthquake assessments. Your GIS staff, okay. if you have some good, reasonable GIS experience, that's fine. Because what's being delivered here is not a complex GIS data set. It's actually fairly simple. And if you have some background there, you could do your own maps and reports. But if you don't, that's where I would encourage. We've already had that discussion here to develop partnerships, like who's going to be deputized, who's going to volunteer to help you with the GIS needs. So that second point may seem trivial, and it is in a normal operating environment. But I'm talking about a post-earthquake environment where the infrastructure will be compromised to some degree. And so these are assumptions. I'm assuming you have email, internet, and yes, electric power. We're not solving that problem here. That should be a conversation you should have outside of this webinar. Yes, I have to introduce some earthquake and building terminology so we're all consistent with our vocabulary, and also make it very clear this product is delivering information about groups of buildings and not individual buildings. So we cannot tell you about your particular building that you're in. What this product tells you is over the large group of buildings in that area. So that's seeing the forest for the trees. You may have heard of HAZUS. You don't need to have it installed. You don't ever have to use it. It's done for you. So some background. This is a marriage of what I would call the core competencies, capabilities of two federal agencies, the United States Geological Survey and FEMA, specifically the Shake Map products from USGS, and in FEMA, the NHRAP program supports the HAZUS model. And in here, we're going to be talking about the HAZUS earthquake model. HAZUS, you may have heard or used in a pre-planning or pre-event planning, and that's its typical usage. So here we're using it after an event has happened. And this has been done already. So FEMA has been doing this for some time in the hurricane realm. So it has been doing post-earthquake assessments in the past 5 years, more in a prototype. I analyzed what came out recently and said, it's ready for prime time, and that's why we're here today. It's a dedicated effort. Both of these programs, the HAZUS and the Shake Map, have at least 2 decades behind them. This is not a flash in the pan for either agency. Subscription cost, it's free. Okay, no cost to you. We'll talk about how to get this information later. In addition to that, there are no passwords. This is fully open data. So no restrictions, no sensitivities in that regard. Well, lots of things going on here. I'll walk it through briefly because this can be helpful to understand, well, where is this information coming from? Do I really trust it? Yes, I'm pulling the curtains back and going to talk about this briefly here. 3 main areas, and I'm going to show the ones on how they're chopped up. The United States Geological Survey is responsible for the products on the left. FEMA comes in the center, and you are situated there in the right-hand column. So going through the USGS portion, there's a worldwide network of seismometers, things that monitor how your ground is shaking, that feeds into a USGS Shake Map system, which quickly, in near real time, generates ground shaking reports. And you've likely seen these in media accounts, where the warmer colors show where the shaking was higher and the cooler colors less. And that, yes, that does include a soil amplification model on that. With the USGS Shake Map is also something called the USGS PAGER. And that offers a very quick assessment of fatalities and economic impact for that given earthquake. If it is and its ratings are green, yellow, orange, and red, and if it is a yellow or above alert, the FEMA NHRAP team is, and it is in the United States, the FEMA NHRAP team is brought into action. And so we're going to look a little bit. Before we do, I'm going to escape out. If you're wondering what shake map is, there it is. You just type in shake map and you'll get here right away. Warning, lots of diversions here, so be mindful of what you're after here. But more recently, there's something in just outside of Oklahoma City. You'll notice this Roman numeral and this M, and we will talk about that in a minute here. Going back to the presentation. Basics, okay? Please distinguish magnitude of an earthquake from the local shaking intensity here. So magnitude is done on this it's done on a decimal scale, and you'll hear it between like 7.8 or 8.2, for example. And it is similar to, it's a refinement of, for old timers here, the Richter scale. It is similar with that, shares a logarithmic nature. So for every step, if you go from a magnitude 7 to a magnitude 8, that's about 32 times the level of energy. That does not tell you, however, what you're experiencing locally. So it depends how far away you are from that fault. And the you have seismometers that measure motion through time. And from that, you can extract out various measurements like peak ground acceleration. Your building engineers will typically be interested in that and some other measurements like its cousins, the spectral accelerations too. However, for the non-specialist, you'll typically hear it express the local shaking intensity expressed as modified Mercalli intensity scale. And those are Roman numerals 1 through 10, as you see on the bottom. And the warmer colors there mean more shaking and more damage. So this is a somewhat subjective scale. It combines the human experience and also building damage. Okay, and if you notice those breakpoints, for those of you who get into this thing, they are not linear breakpoints there. This more detailed description of what each of those categories are. This is the human perception, okay, and then this is the damage on buildings here from not felt to extreme. As you can see in, say, the very strong, it says if it's a well built, it will have slight damage, considerable damage to poorly built. For the CSC, the Cascadia Subduction Zone, we're anticipating shaking in this between 6 and 8 in the greater Portland area. Will be higher at the coast. Okay, go to that shake map page. We're going to talk about something kind of timely, and you will see, warning, you really need to stay focused on that page and what you're after. In fact, you don't have to go to this page. I'm offering this as background. Okay, so shake map, primary product is the shake map, the estimate of ground shaking based on that seismometer data. But there's also a program run in parallel called PAGER. Is my cursor being seen here?
Yep.
Okay, that PAGER is run right after the shake map has been determined, and it quickly comes up with an estimated fatality and economic impact. And that's expressed right here. If you clicked on that for this earthquake, it just happened, of course, in February, the estimate, and it's done in this logarithmic scale here with probabilities. It's saying the greatest, the most likely is it was between 10,000 and 100,000. Now, again, this is to offer an overall broad assessment of the earthquake in a very quick manner. Okay, and in terms of the color scale, if it was 1 or less, it would be a green alert. Between 1 and 10, yellow. So you have this green, yellow, orange, red type alerts. But obviously, this is devastating earthquake with losses in the tens of billions and tens of thousands of fatalities. That was the pager estimate. Not really useful, but the point here is it's triggering. If it is of yellow or above, it will trigger that the FEMA NHRAP team into action and evaluate it if the quake is in the United States. So where does this name come from, USGS pager? Because it consolidates all this information into a single page PDF. So any earthquake that is a magnitude 4 or higher anywhere in the world, you will see it. Notice at the top it says red alert. Okay, that can trigger say USAID and other international organizations into action. That's not really what we're talking about in this group here. Again, it's triggering the 2PAGER effort, and this is the 2PAGER, which is the name for essentially the second page of a pager. Okay, so that's where the name comes from. And this is not the Turkey earthquake, obviously. This is the Cascadia subduction zone, and it's run as a scenario here. And it's summarizing the impacts at a top level. For those in the building inspection, you might see the red, yellow, green tag estimates. And it will list the top counties in terms of various loss categories: economic loss, injuries and fatalities, displaced households. But because there are so many counties impacted by a CSC, you'll only have, say in this case, well, I only see 7 here. So the second page, it's a prototype. It may change. Again, not really valuable for local response recovery efforts, but it can be valuable at state or even broader regional levels.
John, are you saying it's not valuable just because it's so general? As opposed to
right. Your
specific to my
county, for
county?
example, your county may not be here.
Yeah.
But you still have, because
Yeah.
you're not going to see Columbia County in there. Columbia County is a sparsely populated county.
But for Columbia County emergency responders themselves, they may have a lot to do.
Yes, thank you for correcting, or thank you for jumping in there. The vocabulary to say it's not useful. I mean, it may not, it is interesting, and I don't mean to imply it doesn't have a use, but at the local planning level, you might not find what you need from this information.
So that's why we need GIS people, right?
Yes. Okay. Back to this. So we're going to now talk about the HAZUS portion of this. Okay. And it is informed by that shaking over here. Okay. From the USGS shaking, and it got triggered because we're going to pretend it's a red alert, and it will be for a Cascadia. Spoiler alert. It is informed with a standard national building inventory from the U.S. Army Corps, and also census demographic data. And therein, through it provides, once run, it provides estimates at that census tract level on fatalities, injuries, building damage, etc. Because of the size of that, it posts it on a web server. So it just posts it out there in shapefile format, and then it sends out a broadcast email to you all. So to get a little more background on this HAZUS here, we are going to, first of all, talk about classifications. This is the HAZUS classification of the world into these 7 general categories. This kind of information is available at that census tract level prior to an earthquake, and that may be interesting for you. I'll give you a hint with the cursor right here. Okay, you can get that information before the earthquake. Okay.
And by that you mean the information about where you have blocks and tracts of mobile homes or manufactured housing, which are especially vulnerable.
Yes. Okay. Yes, you have demographics information, you have building count, square footage. That's all known prior to the earthquake. Then there's a nice to know, and that's a construction type. And for those of you, if you've been through FEMA P154, you remember your Wood 1, Wood 2, S1. Same classification used here. It's the wood, masonry, steel, concrete, manufactured housing, for example. And then there's also the seismic design levels that are in this, built into this database. They don't necessarily translate into the collapse prevention, immediate occupancy. That's a different level of building classification. What they are is what seismic design codes were in place when the building was constructed. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we were pretty oblivious to the seismic hazard for years. And so the codes have been rather slow, unlike in, say, California, because of historical earthquakes there. They've implemented them much sooner. In Oregon and to most of Washington, they've been a little behind, we'll say. So that's part of that building database, and that's what goes in. So if you have an older building data set, they will be less resilient than buildings, more modern buildings. So getting a little in the details for the building inspector crowd, this is what comes out of HAZUS. The number of buildings that are in these damaged states. And you see the little pictures there trying to diagram the what they mean. Okay, so that's overall figures. If you really want to get into it, this is for a wood light frame. And if you're into building inspection, you will recognize a number of these terms. I'm not going to read them. Instead, I will just say this number of buildings put in moderate are generally regarded as green tag, and extensive are yellow, and complete are red tag. So there's your estimates of green, yellow, red. That's aggregated again at that census tract level. The 2PAGER product does rename these, so I got to warn you about going, instead of calling it none, it's no damage, slight is affected, but it's the same, just same information with different names. And if you're wondering what green, yellow, and red are, they are not traffic lights. They are these guys, placards. Legally authorized inspectors can restrict or forbid or allow use of a building based on the soundness of the structure.
And if I could just jump in, each jurisdiction, their building official is the one designated, and they can delegate, but to place these placards and to remove them.
Yes. Okay. So moving on. Trivia quiz. According to the most recent HAZUS modeling we did, within our 5 county areas, what building construction type will likely have the greatest number of red tagged buildings? Okay, so notice wood frame buildings dominate in the Pacific Northwest. Okay, it's like do the calculation there, it's like 85% or something like that. Okay, but we do have concrete, reinforced masonry, unreinforced masonry, steel, and manufactured housing, or also called mobile home. So those are some numbers there. So which
So
one
that's
of
the
these
total number of houses. That's the total number of those type of buildings.
in the 5 county area? Yeah, that's the model that's coming out there. So which one of these will have the greatest number of red tagged buildings? And I will say this not by percentage, but by total number of red tagged buildings. So anybody want to jump in and guess on this? You might think wood just because of the sheer number, okay? But it's a surprising answer. What comes out is manufactured housing. And that's because prior to stricter codes about anchoring and bracing, they're basically on floating foundations, and they can easily slip off, and then basically they're red tagged. So what would you do with this information ahead of time? Now we do have, these are modeling results, obviously not real results, okay? But what would you do with that ahead of time? Well, if I was doing some planning exercises, I would want to know, okay, where are the manufactured housing clusters? Or perhaps they're distributed. They are occasionally one by, separate, but often in clusters. Where are they in my service area? that's an example of how to use this information ahead of time. Also, injuries and fatalities. There are two scenarios here, and back to that wood frame. Remember, I pointed out the numbers there. There's two scenarios, a 2 a.m. and a 2 p.m. work and school day. And so there, the interesting question is, where are people at nighttime? Most people are in their primary residence, and most of those are wood frame, which are more resilient than compared to some of the other structural types. Okay, so the assumption here is 95% of the population are in their home. The other 5% are in 24/7 centers, or they're still out clubbing. The daytime assumption uses before COVID times. Okay, now we all know the question of, well, what about commercial office space? We don't know what the new normal will be. However, educational buildings are occupied, some of them less resilient than the homes that the students live in at nighttime. So you can imagine that the daytime casualty estimates, I shouldn't use that word, I should say the daytime injury and fatality estimates will be higher than the nighttime. So that both will come out of the 2-pager model, I believe. We'll have to clarify that, Maureen. And this gets into a little detail of those casualty levels for those of you who want to plan on this. It ranges from moderate to life-threatening to instantly killed or mortally injured here. So again, nighttime, level 1, level 2, level 3, daytime, level 1, level 2, level 3. All right, now we're going to get to you, the broadcast email. Okay, we're going to go through an example. Last Christmas, or shortly before Christmas, 2:34 a.m. Keep in mind that timestamp, 2:34 a.m. on December 20th. There was a MAG 6.4 outside of Eureka. Pager was run, and it said, no, the fatalities, probably less than 1. So that was a green. However, the economic losses were projected between 100 million and 1 billion. That is an orange, and that triggered the FEMA NHRAP team into action. And they sent out an email. There it is. This is what went to the people signed up on the 2-pager distribution list. So I'm going to go through several points here. First is the timestamp. Now you may not be able to see that. That says Tuesday, 12/20/22 at 1:09 p.m. That is within 10 hours of the event. Again, timely information, okay, that was and then sent out. I'll point out the shake map version. This is quite important for your GIS people and for yourself to understand what that means. There's some top level summaries, valuable for regional planning, perhaps not as much at the local. Again, top level summaries. So you want to get the detailed tabular and GIS data. There it is on an Amazon AWS. Click on that. Those are shape files. Bring them into your GIS. And we would do that if we were doing a detailed GIS session, but we are not. Again, I'm going to point this out, this shake map version, and also note it was reviewed by FEMA and USGS subject matter experts. In this particular case, the analysts only modeled 2 counties. It did not make sense to model more. It would just clutter it up, and that was their discretion. And because they were looking at the ground motions and determined the impact is only going to be limited to the Humboldt and Trinity counties. However, we are going to dig deep into a Cascadia subduction zone simulation. This is a scenario. This did not occur. Let me step back and say COCs have occurred, of course, for quite some time, and in the indigenous population experience certainly has had that. I'm talking about post-settlement experience, and it has not occurred. So again, a scenario. And this is our scientists' best estimate of what a CSE could look like. But the actual earthquake will always throw seismologists curveballs, okay? It will be different for various reasons, but that doesn't stop one from doing some planning exercises. So that's what we're doing here, taking a reasonable model of what a CSC could look like. And so we're going to pop out of there and go to GIS. That's Washington County, Oregon. And what you're seeing in the blue squiggles, excuse me, what you're seeing in the blue squiggles are the census tract boundaries, and they often follow arterials like Highway 26, occasionally follow rivers like the Tualatin River here. So Washington County has 134 census tracts, about 4,500 people per census tract, and about 1,400 buildings per census tract. So that's an overall, although there's wide variations there. We're going to zoom in and look at the census tracts at the 217, I-5, and 99 triangle right here. This is the three counties, Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas. So you can see the number of buildings there. I can turn that on if it gives you a good visual of what goes on behind this model here. But more important, I want to show the city boundary right here. So you can see city boundaries kind of, sort of, but not necessarily so map into these census tracts. So for example, in this one right here, Lake Oswego and Portland are splitting this census tract. But more or less, if you wanted to, you could do this ahead of time and say, well, understanding some of these are partial. I could call these as part of these census tracts are related to Tigard, if that would work for you. Just warning, a lot of variation there. To show you the tabular data that comes out, here are your tracts. Okay, this is census tract naming. And then here are the various numbers associated with that particular census tract. Remember the no damage, affected, minor, major, destroyed, the fatal night, fatal day. Okay, so those are available at that census tract level. And if you wanted to, you can find out. I think you might guess where this one is. Let's go find it. And I'll turn this on right here. This is, oh, darn it. Okay, turn this off. And it's this census block, right, census tract right there. And you could probably guess where that is. That's downtown Portland. Again, assuming an occupancy, daytime occupancy, everybody's back at their office. Portland folks will know the situation of the buildings down here. Many modern ones, a lot of older ones too. So it's the older ones generally that are contributing to the high fatality rate there in the daytime. So that's an example there. Now, in terms of red tag buildings, this is a choropleth, which is the warmer color showing you where more red tag buildings are compared to other census tracts. And again, just total number of red tagged buildings. If you wanted to go in there, you can then go find out, all right, again, you can order this on however you wish. If you want to filter this by county, simple GIS queries you can do there. You can also represent that red, yellow, green as a pie chart, which I think is kind of fun here. Talking about a disaster, it's really not fun, but it's, it's a GIS exercise. And so what the pie chart is saying, for this census tract, the gray is don't need inspecting, the green is needs inspecting but passed, yellow is restricted, red is do not occupy. And as you might expect, you're going to have a variation. Again, in downtown Portland, at least half of them, according to this model, are going to end up in that category. Whereas you move out to these residential areas, this is the Irvington area, even though they're older wood frame, you notice that the ratios there really lower. So this is a way to look at your data in a different, more graphically rich, perhaps informative way. If you want to look at another one called displaced population as a percent of the total household, sorry, I should say it's displaced households as a proportion of total households. This ranges from less than 2% to 25%. So this is, and it will vary. For example, this block right here, only say 5%, or actually 2% of the households will need to find other shelter, whereas downtown it's like 1 in 4. Okay, it's like 25%. Again, this is another way to represent this, what I consider to be fairly rich data that's coming out at this census tract level.
Hey, John, this is Angela.
Yes.
So you talked about how you do work on your front end to get supporting or ancillary data sets to, be able to make use of the 2-pager data when it comes out. So when you're doing this exercise right now, what I'm guessing was like the US Census tracts and the counties and the cities and building footprints were all things that you already had loaded, and was it only like 6 of the layers on the left panel that came from it?
Okay, so yeah, good point here. The census tract, okay, I'll show you in the geometries of the census tract are available right now. And we'll walk through these columns of what is available. The red tag, that comes after the earthquake, but we're pretending here. Okay, we're using a scenario.
John, and you're saying this is the data that's available through 2PAGER and which is a combination of HAZUS and FEMA.
Yes. So Angela, this is available right now for every census tract. Population, households, exposure.
Right.
Okay, that's right here. These, like the debris estimates, the displaced households, the sheltering needs, the injuries, those come after it's been run through 2PAGER. But we're doing a simulation here, it's a pretend earthquake. Okay. As for ancillary data sets, well, we'll get into that. There's a lot of information that can be tied to census tracts. Okay, a lot. And that's where, some of the creativity of your GIS people and also what you might be interested in can drive that. Okay. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go back to the presentation here. We have doing okay on time. If you're wondering, does 2PAGER include liquefaction and landsliding? Currently, no. Someday it might. There are technical reasons. This is a challenging one to include in a scientifically defensible manner. What I will say is if you are aware of areas with landsliding or liquefaction, the damage estimates will be increased. And for those of you operating at a state level, for buildings in the tsunami zone, it's only the earthquake damage that is given there. The tsunami is not factored into building damage assessments. Not saying it won't ever happen, but currently that's not the case. The future plans. These are detailed points. I'm not going to get into them, which is why I highlighted them. What I want to say is this. As Ann said, I've been watching the 2PAGER effort for some years, and I had concerns about some of the building data quality that fed it. And I was a little dubious about suggesting its use for, in a broader audience like this. Last fall, HAZUS released a version 6.0 where it used a much improved data set called the National Structure Inventory to inform the building characteristics, and it also used the Census 2020 data. And with that, I thought, well, yes, there's still room for improvement, and those points get to that, but don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And so that's why I'm making this recommendation now that it's at a point of stability where I believe it can be useful for a local emergency management
And
people.
John, just to clarify, you're saying you're recommending that we sign up for and use 2PAGER. You think it's at a position now where it could give us a lot more information than we can get otherwise.
It was in a prototype prior to, and a year ago, it's like, yes, good. I'm glad it's happening. But given the big boost that happened with the updated HAZUS release, that's where I said, yeah, this is good enough. Let's go. So there is something I kept on pounding, that shake map version. This gets into some geophysical and geotechnical details. In the hours after a major earthquake, not all of your seismometers will report in for various reasons. And also the seismologist might be surprised by some of the characteristics and say, we need a better model to describe what went on. And that's what happened in that earthquake in Turkey that we were talking about earlier. On the left here is ShakeMap version 5, which was put out 4 hours after the event. And if you look at the revised version, once more seismometers came in and they adjusted the particular fault model, a lot more shaking went on. Okay, in terms of the spatial extent. So the Cascadia will be complex and there will be different versions of ShakeMap. And so one of the items on the to-do list here is to consult with USGS and FEMA and just talk about what we could expect for a subduction zone earthquake and how often these updates may happen. The key point here is any maps, any reports, any tables, label your ShakeMap version. So other issues to resolve, I won't get into these. I'm maintaining a list and I'm going to be the technical liaison with the FEMA NHRAP team. And and by the way, that practice data set, I'm happy to share it with GIS people. You see something that could be more useful, let's speak up, and I'll summarize those concerns up and approach the FEMA NHRAP team and see if we can make that the output of the 2PAGER more useful for your purposes. Hey, if you want to practice with this right now, or you got a GIS person you want to have started on this, I'm ready to go. We got all that information, including a user guide to help you with the interpretation of those. You saw the fields I gave you there that you can help with there, and where you can find more documentation on those, such as, well, what does a displaced household mean? If I said displaced population, please, I meant displaced household, okay? And sheltering needs. So that is available right now if that's of interest. And I would be remiss to mention it reports on any major earthquake. Things that will keep you up at night. In the greater Portland area, we have at least 10 named faults or fault zones that geologists believe to be seismogenic or capable of rupturing. In other words, they're not Jurassic era dormant faults. They potentially are active. And I picked on one. It's highlighted there in cyan. It's an area where I spent many happy hours on Lacamas Lake in East Clark County, and totally oblivious to the fault underneath the lake. So I ran it through and did essentially a 2PAGER equivalent there, and you see it on the right, the number of red tags, as you would expect in East Clark County, quite impacted. As you go to Hillsborough, really no impact. So what's the point here? Do your best preparing for a CSC, okay? And should nature throw you one of these curveballs, you'll be ready. You'll be able to handle it. Okay. The local damage may be higher, as in this case, in say a downtown Camas, than say it would see from a CSC, but overall the CSC is still the granddaddy of them all. Do your best preparing for it. You'll be able to handle something like this because it will be the same identical product from the 2-pager program in terms of the information that's being provided to you. If you're bought in and you like what you see, recommendation, get this in your onboarding for new staff members. And there's no geographic filter here aside from the United States. If you get a 2-pager email alert and the earthquake was in Utah, great. Use it as practice. Look at it. And also, this is a model. And if you want to find a reason to dismiss the model, oh, no problem. I can guarantee you will find a data point in there where the red tag buildings estimated 57, but you only counted 40. Do you throw the whole results away? Please don't. Please give it a chance and work through it and understand, well, maybe you could use it more in a ratio or proportions of. And also, on the other side, trust but verify. That's an old Russian proverb. These results aren't truth, they are estimates. So be reasonable about how to use model results like that come with the 2-pager. I won't go into these in details. This is for a GIS crowd. What I'm going to recommend is these right here, stuff you can do ahead of time. What are we talking about? Does anybody know what I'm talking about here? Okay, social vulnerability, if equity is part of what you're doing, okay, and I'm going to share something. These are the types of information that go behind. You're seeing this, what, a PDF page, I'm assuming?
Yep.
Okay, so those are the types of data sets that are available at that census tract level. And if equity, I know, in a post-earthquake environment, it's going to be high stress, but you can do some homework ahead of time and understand where underserved communities are within your jurisdictions here. And then lastly, 2-pager, if you like what you see, and can talk about what happens next in terms of signing up for this from an email broadcast point of view. I would say if you want to get a GIS people involved, we'd also like to hear about that. To give an idea of the scale there's the CSC modeled results. And yeah, it's rock and roll time from Mendocino all the way up to Blaine. And in fact, into Vancouver Island, but of course, HAZUS is only modeled in the United States. So thanks all. And if there's other questions, I think we have a little bit of time here.
Yeah. Thank you, John. I do want to say to everybody that as John has shown you, there's a general product that will be somewhat informational at a county level, but to drill down, you probably want to rope in your GIS person. And we're going to do some trainings later in May, specifically for GIS people. So if you're on my email, my newsletter distribution list will send a call out to folks and tell you about that. And you can rope in GIS to understand how to play with the data now, but how to use it when these alerts come out. And we'll collect names for FEMA instead of everybody bombarding them of who from RDPO area or this whole region, who wants to be on this email distribution list. And Angela, we're hoping that this will be another kind of admin thing that RDPO will look at because so that they can keep it updated. I think it's too much to expect that FEMA would be updating the emails and people come and move to other areas. So I think we'll want to do that. Anyway, Randy or Karen and Marina, I don't know if you want to throw in anything. And anybody have a last question for John? So we can stay on a bit. I think one of the things I get from your presentation, John, is that this product is about 100% more useful when paired an emergency manager with a GIS person and somebody
Yes.
who knows how to do it. And I think one of the next things that we're going to do is find jurisdictions, municipalities, counties and stuff that are interested in this and make sure they've got a GIS person that's on board, and you're going to offer some training for that. But before we get any further, any questions? Anybody else want to jump in and ask John anything while we have him? And we have Maureen Kelly, who's on the NHRAP team at FEMA, that can answer some questions. I asked her, you know, the ATC 20, which is the way that we do building damage assessments, has some, also has some categories for green, yellow, and red, though I think some of them are mushy. And the HAZAS categories are a little, they have like 5 categories instead of 3 categories. I'm curious about the thinking on that and if there's any kind of movement to align those two things. So, Maureen, if you want to speak to that, or if anybody else wants to jump in with a question, we can just preempt that and you can tell me privately.
Hey, and yeah, so the HIASIS results can be translated to the ATC 20 tagging requirements. And so on the top of the 2-pager, we've got that has this building tagging estimates, and those kind of break down the ones that are inspected, restricted use, or unsafe.
Oh, so that exactly mirrors the ATC 20. It's just that there's that, it seems like there's that one where there were 5 categories, but you have a way of collapsing those categories to mirror what we will expect from the ATC 20 building categories.
We do, yes. So those have been translated into the 2-pager, where we've got the 3 categories there from our initial 5 categories.
And one of the challenging things about the ATC 20 is that you have building inspectors going out, and their job is really just to say, is this building safe for people to go in? Their job isn't really to say this will cost this much to repair, or it's beyond repair, or that. And we are, in some ways, in order to get an emergency declaration and get the other information FEMA needs, we're tasking our building inspectors with making some judgments that would lead to kind of building damage estimates. So this method, or the HAZAS, the way the HAZAS is evaluating the possible damage, might be a quicker way of getting those estimates so that we don't have to make our building safety evaluators address that. The way the city of Portland
I would ask it this way, for a disaster declaration, if you don't mean to put you on the spot here, but say for hurricane, if there's other hazards where the HAZAS loss estimates in terms of building repair costs or building content or the other economic factors, have they been used as a basis for a disaster declaration?
They have. So for hurricane, our initial loss estimates through HAZAS, which we start running about 72 hours prior to landfall, based on the national, the NHC advisories coming in. We run those through HAZAS, and they have been used in the past to expedite disaster declarations and presidential disaster declarations ahead of time. For earthquake, I'm not positive if it's been used in the past for disaster declarations, but I think that it definitely could be.
Yeah, well, yeah, unfortunately we have, I don't want to say unfortunately, let me strike that, please. We don't have that many earthquake, historical damaging earthquakes to draw from. You know, there was the Anchorage 2018, and then there was the Ferndale, and then Southern California, but that was a relatively sparsely populated area. So yeah, we just don't have quite the record as hurricanes or flooding for that matter.
But Ken, I see you have your hand up, so you can jump on. But Daniel and Curtis from OEM, this raises an interesting question of can we get to that disaster declaration number in another way besides the building damage assessments? Like, are there ways to get to that information so that our building safety assessors can really just think about safety and not analyzing? So Ken, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, just a couple of things. For Washington County, we would engage our assessment and taxation folks for coming up with cost figures for damage. It's just kind of throwing that into the conversation here. It's how we would determine that we would not task our building inspectors with trying to figure out how much a building is worth and all that. So they would go out and do the initial assessment.
Who did you say would be doing it?
The county assessment and taxation division. They have all that data on property values and building values and stuff like that. So we would pair up in the back at our EOC, our assessment taxation folks with our building inspectors. Building inspectors say it's 50% damaged. Assessment taxation would say, okay, that's worth, the value is $100,000, so it's $50,000 damage. That's kind of how we would arrange to come up with those types of figures.
Ken, that's how the city of Portland is doing it also. We just have those taxation figures built into the back of our damage assessment app. So when the inspector says 50%, it gets calculated of what that is.
Yeah, we're not there yet, but I just wanted to throw that out there. That's how we'd approach it. And then the second thing I wanted to ask is, John, you had shown the GIS spreadsheet you were going through that I was very interested in, but I missed where you accessed that from. Is that part of the USGS, or is that something else that you switched to?
The data, are you talking of the shake map or the HAZUS 2-pager data sets?
It might have been the HAZUS data sets where you were showing the map and then you had the different layers of
data. Sure. Yeah, that's the training wheels data set, as I'm calling it. I will send out a pointer for that. Okay. So no, I haven't put that in here yet. I want to get some understandings there before distributing that training wheels data set. But yeah, glad to get that ready.
Where would somebody access that? Is that after an earthquake when you're on the email distribution list and you get the summary data, or is it online?
It's on a cloud server, so you would have a pointer, and that is included in that email. Set aside the training wheels, that would be a separate pointer to another location. The official posting from FEMA and USGS through this 2-pager would be on a cloud service, and that link is in that email, and anybody then can click on it. You can forward that email to anybody, no restrictions.
So John, I just want to clarify that if people signed up for the 2-pager product, they would get this email that had a link to summary data that GIS folks could manipulate. What you did in there was develop kind of a practice database that people could use to see how they could manipulate it. And it seemed to me like there was a call in your presentation to have some folks actually really look at it and play with it. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, if you want to play with the Ferndale earthquake, the one that happened in Northern California, sure, it's there. Go help yourself. To make it more relatable for the RDPO folks, though, I created a data set for the greater Portland area that is scenario.
Got it. And you're saying that's the training wheels one, the CSV one.
Yeah.
And you're not quite ready to release it and have people practice? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I would just give it that's one, just by the way, with the Paul and Diego I was playing with. Yeah, I mean, it's I could have that ready later this week.
We will that's something that would probably distribute to all the GIS folks and the emergency managers within our BDAP and anybody else that was interested. But I mean, that's something that we would
Yes.
probably pass for that.
Yes.
Okay, Mara, did you have looks like you have a question?
Yes, I was curious, do you have an idea of when you might incorporate the post-COVID outlook of where populations are focused, such as assuming that half are now at home most of the time, apparently, or is there a plan for that? I have one more question after that.
I'll let Marie, I don't know. And that's a FEMA has this program decision there. So I don't know, Maureen, if you have any perspective on that.
No, we don't have plans at this time to update that. I don't know if like the 2 a.m. estimates could be more comparable to the 2 p.m. nowadays with people working from home more. But a lot of people have gone back to the office too. So I think we're just kind of waiting to see how much that really changes throughout the population and see if that's a change we need to make for as we look to the future for open houses, which we're working on now, which is going to be a web-based open data, open methods version of HAZUS.
And Mara, you had another question?
I did. I want to clarify. I believe, John, you mentioned in the beginning that you cannot focus on kind of a solo building. So I do work next to two very big buildings that we would want to speak, and I'll speak for our legislative friends, such as the Capitol building went through this very large and is still going through that large seismic retrofit project. And I work next to the Supreme Court, which is this beautiful white palace built in early 1900s and just finished a 55+ million, might have been as high as 90, I'm not sure, a seismic retrofit. So any recommendations on how to focus on just a solo building or something like that that is difficult to work with?
No, I understand. And this would require consultation with a structural engineer and to set up parameters in another HAZUS program called Advanced AEBM. This could be possible, but it's not within this 2-pager context at this time. Although it is possible post-earthquake to say, what were the ground motions? I mean, again, that PGA and other types. What were the ground motions experienced at that building? What are the structural characteristics of that particular building? And yes, there is a more detailed HAZUS model that could be run. I got to warn you, that's a lot of setup. You got to get a structural engineer that can understand what we're talking about here, and then designate somebody to actually run that. So that's not currently in the 2-pager plans. It can be done, but you'd have to have dedicated resources to make that happen. Maureen, has this question come up elsewhere?
Yeah, I think that is something that people are definitely interested in. And I agree, John, that it definitely needs some engineering expertise to be able to do it well. One thing we do have hopes for in the future is being able to do HAZUS analyses at the building level. And that's something we're all very interested in, but we just have to make sure the methods and the engineering are all there to be able to do it well versus the way we aggregate up to the census tract level now. So more to come on that. That's a great question.
Thank you.
Hey, I just want to be respectful of time, and we have Maureen here and John. So feel free to stay and ask any questions you want. Ken, it looks like you have one. I just also want to give people permission to leave if they need to do their next thing. But Ken, did you want to ask another question?
Yeah, I find all this fascinating, both on the shake map and the just everything presented, but it was presented as, an awareness kind of level of what's going on. Is there training on this, a more formal training presentation that has been presented or is going to be developed or presented, where I could actually invite my GIS folks and my building officials and others that are interested in this, on the products, how to use them, the applicability? I would be very interested in having that information. Thanks.
Yeah, Ken, I would love Maureen to answer this for FEMA in general, but as part of the contract that my project has with John, he's developing that user guide. We're planning on holding a couple of sessions, but we really want people like you at the county level to be matched up with a GIS person so that we can actually do some real training and people can know how to use it. So yeah, we do plan to do that. And I'm just kind of getting my mind around it, and probably one of our next newsletters will ask for people to match up. But everybody like you at the county municipal level needs to have a GIS partner that can really learn to do this. John, did you want to say anything more about that? Or Maureen, do you want to say anything from the FEMA level?
No, aside from reiterating what you said, yeah, we could do a webinar and walk through this. There's no formal, I'll let Maureen speak to this. As far as I know, there's no formal FEMA outroll on this.
Yeah, that's correct. We don't have any formal training courses right now. We do have a suite of YouTube videos available, and I'm just getting some links now to post in the chat for you all. So that's some self-paced learning. And then we also have a bunch of manuals and user guides on our hasasfema.gov webpage. And then occasionally we do quarterly webinars. And I believe actually the next, either the spring or the summer or this fall, we're going to be doing one on Hazas earthquake and the earthquake annualized losses study that we just completed and we're getting ready to publish soon. So that might be of interest to folks as well. So I can, if you're part of our Hazas listserv list, which is actually different from the earthquake results distribution list that we were talking about earlier, you'll receive notification of upcoming webinars and resources that we have too. So I can go ahead and just post a few links in the chat.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. And I would like to see and encourage any kind of training, introductory, how to use the product pre-disaster and during disaster, kind of different modules. In my role, I do both emergency response, disaster response, training and coordination, as well as pre-disaster training and mitigation planning, stuff like that. So this is useful in many aspects, but without it being coordinated, it's just kind of, oh, it's out there, use it, but without really knowing how or where it applies and how to apply it, or the intents of it. That would be good to have some guidance on those types of questions for what I'm doing. Thanks.
Okay. And thank you, Daniel, for posting quite a bit of information on the state's perspective in the chat, and also some links to FEMA and then to the Hazas product. So any other burning questions that you want to ask before we close this out? So Maureen, you did used to offer classes at EMI, but no longer on Hazas? I didn't realize.
Yeah, so I think it was starting in 2021. We ended our offerings there. And a lot of that was due to it just the amount of time it took to update the courses, working with the Institute versus our software versions. We typically release a new version of Hazas once a year, sometimes twice a year. And we just weren't able to keep up with updating the courses in that amount of time. And as I mentioned earlier, we're starting to think more about moving forward to open HASIS, and we're in the planning stages of that. So we encourage people to use the YouTube videos. They are really helpful and very topical depending on what you're looking to do in HASIS. And we have a lot of other materials that we're maintaining and keeping up to date with the versions of the software. But yeah, unfortunately, those formal classes, we weren't able to continue. But we're looking to definitely have more formal training in the future.
Okay. And Maureen posted in the chat a sign up for the HASIS listserv. So that's not a sign up for 2PAGER, which is what John's been presenting, right, Maureen? That's a sign up to just know more about HASIS and that.
Yes, correct.
Okay, cool. Any other last words or thoughts? Thanks so much for everybody participating. And that problem you mentioned earlier, Ken, about the link, we're gonna track that down and I'll notify people about tomorrow if we find that was an issue. So, okay. Anything else? Do you see the Maureen's just posted the YouTube stuff there? So grab that and thanks so much for attending. And for those of you that are involved with the RBDAP project, we will be following up later on getting people signed up for 2PAGER and the kind of training we'll offer. Okay, so thank you, John. Thank you very much. Thanks, Sandra, for doing all the behind the scenes stuff. And thanks, Maureen, for showing up from FEMA. And thanks to everybody else for your participation.
Thank you very much for the invite. And I just posted the rest of we have 4 playlists and I was trying to get the links in the chat before we ended the call. So I just posted them all there. Thank you.
Good. Well, we'll also send them out to folks afterwards. So
Perfect.
after tomorrow. All right. Thanks, everybody.